All right. So, welcome to week 6 of the semester. Uh, Crazy that we are already in week 6. But this week we're going to talk about the exciting world of email, everyone's favorite communication method, especially in these times where you get about a million emails a day. Um, so we've worked with email a little bit before already in this semester, but we are going to kind of dive in a little deeper this week, talking about the exact conventions of an email, when it's appropriate to send in a professional setting, and really how you should be laying out a professional email. So, some breaking news. Many critics are fed up with email, as I'm sure we have all been at some point, especially this semester. The critics really cite that emails are often poorly written, so people don't really know how to properly format one, don't know how to list out their ideas and what they're saying in the best way. Email takes up too much time. I'm sure we can all attest that we spend a crazy amount of time just sending and responding to emails. They claim that email increases stress and also that it can leave a dangerous permanent record. So that would mean even if you delete something, if it has some kind of sensitive material or something, there's probably still a way that someone could come across it. But whether you love it or hate it, for better or worse, email remains one of the largest communication methods used in business communication and really just in every context. We might move away from it someday, but as of now, you need to know how to send a proper email. So, when is email appropriate? So, as you might imagine, there's tons of different genres within business writing. And like we talked about way back in like weeks 1 and 2, you have to pick that appropriate channel for whatever message you're going to be sending. So, when is an email an appropriate channel? Email is good for short, informal messages that request information and respond to inquiries. So it's a good place to ask for more info, ask questions, and respond to those questions. However, it's not a substitution for face-to-face conversations or phone calls. So if you know that this interaction you're beginning is going to contain some kind of sensitive topic, if it requires negotiations, if it's something that's really personal, that's best reserved for some kind of face-to-face conversation, a phone call, something that prompts a little more interaction, gives you a chance for kind of more of a dialogue. I've included this just because I find it super relatable. I don't know about anyone else, but I hate the phone. I'd much rather email, but that's just not always the best way to go about sending a message. So, professional emails have a few different components, and those are compelling subject lines, so something that's going to catch your receiver's attention, make them want to open the message, appropriate greetings, so dear so-and-so, hello so-and-so, things like that. Well-organized bodies, so presenting your ideas well, highlighting important information, and complete closing information. And we'll get to all of that, break it down a little further. So, compelling and concise subject lines. When you're making your subject line for a professional email, you want to avoid what the textbook calls meaningless statements like help, important, or meeting. We think that these things might catch people's attention, but you're receiving so many messages that often have some kind of subject line using these words that they're often really easy to overlook. I'm sure we've all gotten a message that says something is really important when really it's just kind of useless to us. It's really helpful in your subject line to include a verb. So, for example, need you to attend November 4th meeting. That might be a little more eye-catching than November 4th meeting. Or it gives the receiver an idea that this email is asking something of them. It might have more of a sense of urgency. They're going to be more likely to open it. Summarize the purpose of the message clearly and make the receiver want to open the message. So try to think of the main idea of this message. How can you boil it down into just a few words that's going to be something that compels your receiver to open it? And be sure to adjust the subject line if the topic changes after a thread of replies. So if you sent it to, say, a small group, or you're having kind of a lengthy discussion with one person over email, and you begin talking about something that's totally different from your initial subject line, make sure you adjust it just so you can keep track of what the message is about, so everything's clear, and so you can go back to the message if need be and kind of trace where the conversation went. Include a greeting. This one's pretty simple, but this helps receivers tell whether they're the primary or secondary receiver. A lot of times in business messages, you're going to CC or BCC someone, or messages are forwarded, and it can get really confusing if there's not that primary or if there's not that proper greeting that lets you know exactly who this message is meant for. A greeting sets the tone for your message and reflects your audience analysis. So this reflects how much you know about your receiver, what positions the two of you are in, whether they're superior, whether you have more of a friendly relationship. For colleagues and friends, so people you know a little bit more, you have kind of a closer working relationship, informal greetings are fine. So that would be something like, "Hi, Chloe," "Good morning, Chloe," "Greetings, Chloe," things that feel maybe a bit more casual. But for more formal messages, and especially messages to people you don't know, it's always good to go ahead and use a more formal greeting. So that would be dear. So, "Dear Miss Smith," or "Dear Mr. Stevens." Organize the body of your email for readability and tone. So in the revision phase of your writing, if you remember back a few weeks ago, that 3x3 process of writing, in that last stage where you're revising, ask yourself the following questions. Did you start directly? Did you have that proper greeting? Did you start with the main idea, if that's what your message entails? Did you group similar topics together? Are your thoughts well organized? Is it easy to follow your train of thought, what you're talking about? Could some information be presented in bulleted or numbered lists? This is a really good thing to think about in emails, especially if you're presenting a lot of information, if you're asking a lot of questions. It's always nice to have something organized this way, because a lot of people are reading emails on their phone, and it just presents better. It's easier to read, easier to soak up some of the most important information. So it's always a good idea to see if you could use bullets or numbered lists if it's applicable to your message. Could you add headings, especially for messages with more than a few paragraphs? If you know that your message is going to be really long, how could you organize it so you could add a heading, make things a little clearer, make your receiver able to kind of jump to a certain point if they're looking for a specific detail? And do you see any phrases or sentences that could be condensed? So going back a couple weeks now, think about clarity and conciseness. Again, people are reading emails on their phones. They're reading them while they're multitasking and doing other things. You want to make sure that everything is clear, concise, that they get the information they need as quickly as possible. To convey the best tone, it's always a good practice to try reading your message aloud. And if something sounds strange, or if a message sounds really curt, it probably is, and you need some sort of adjustment. It's also a good way to notice typos or just kind of odd phrasing. This is a really good practice for any kind of writing that you do. Also really important is closing effectively. So include an action statement with due dates and requests. So at the end, go ahead and sum everything up by giving them the most important information again. Even if you've already mentioned it, it always helps to close with this, so it's fresh in their mind once they've read the message. So if you're sending an email saying something like, I need you to turn in this application by November 4th, you would probably want to open with that and close with that. Make sure that you're always really specific about due dates. Try not to say something like, this is due next Tuesday. Give them the specific day, the specific time if it's applicable. Consider using a friendly closing, such as best regards or sincerely. Thank you works too, something like that. I've included this here because I thought it was funny. I don't know if you'd want to use that with a lot of messages, but if you ever email me and want to use it, I will appreciate it. And always include your name in the sign-off, just so people can keep track of who's sending this message. It's just the polite thing to do. Always make sure that you include your name in that signature. And it's a good habit to try using a signature block with full contact information, which we'll talk a little bit more about here. So signature blocks, I'm sure we've all seen them. It's just once you sign your name, it's like a little blurb of information underneath. Give some more context like phone number, company, things like that. If you're making a signature block, you want to make sure you stick to the basics. Things like obviously your name, your job title, your company name, the address of the company maybe, phone number. If you have a website, include that URL or a link, and your email address. Of course, you can consider your personal habits and your audience too. So personal habits, like if you don't really interact over the phone and instead you keep in touch with people over social media, you might consider putting a link to your Twitter or your Instagram. Same thing with your audience. If you feel like your audience isn't necessarily going to call you on the phone or visit your company in person, you might replace those points with something else that's more applicable to them or that you're more likely to use. So kind of moving away from the components of an email, we're going to talk about one of the most common emails that you'll probably send and receive, and that's some sort of request. So when writing requests, when you think your request will be met positively, go ahead and start with the main idea. So if you think your sender or your receiver is going to be willing to complete this request or at least interested in learning more, go ahead and just start right out of the gate with what you want to talk about. The first sentence of an information request is usually a question or a polite command. So start out with a question or what you're wondering about, or say if you have multiple questions, you might start out saying, please answer the following questions about da-da-da-da-da. So when you're writing requests, you want to be really careful to provide details. Analyze your needs, organize your ideas, and frame your request logically. So again, going back to just organizing your ideas well, making sure that your receiver can follow your train of thought, that you're listing any questions or requests you have in an order that's going to make it easy for them to process the information and respond to your request. Again, itemize appropriate information in bulleted or numbered lists. This is really helpful if you're asking multiple questions. It just makes things easier to read, and it makes it a bit easier for someone to respond because then they can just send responses for each individual question. Writing requests to closing an email when you're writing a request. Close with appreciation and an action request. So tell the reader politely what needs to be done. If a date is important, set an end date to take action and why. So let them know what their deadline is and why that deadline exists. So if they have to turn in a form by a certain date, let them know what the date is and why it needs to be turned in by that date. So you need to turn in this form by November 5th so we can begin processing your request. Things like that. Avoid overused endings like thank you for your cooperation. That's just kind of overly common. Try to avoid thank you in advance for because it's presumptuous. It's assuming that they're going to complete your request. And the textbook suggests avoiding if you have any questions, do not hesitate to call me. Just because it suggests that you didn't make yourself clear. Now, in certain contexts, this would probably be fine to use. It all just depends on your working relationship with someone. I'm sure you'll notice if I respond to one of your emails, that's usually how I close, just because it's a bit different of a relationship between teacher and student than it would be between colleagues in a more business-like setting. So that last one is a bit more contextual, but it is good to avoid those first two most of the time. So now that we know a little bit more about composing emails, how they're supposed to be laid out, and writing requests, you have a few more tasks for the week. First, I want you to read this Forbes article called As Workplace Communication Evolves, Email May Not Prevail. You can find the link to this under week 6 on Canvas. This is just kind of offering a unique perspective about what we might do if email eventually phases out as our main communication method. And that's what we're going to use kind of as the platform for the week 6 discussion board. So on the discussion board, you'll find some questions. I ask that you respond to those. And please remember to respond to at least 2 other posts. That's what'll get you full credit for this discussion board. After that, you're going to complete the inquiry email assignment. You can find all the information for that on Canvas. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Look in the textbook if you need more information about email. I'll post a PDF version of these slides if you want to go back through and reread anything. But yeah, as always, if you need any help with this or anything else, feel free to reach out. And otherwise, I'll be in touch. Have a great week.